How's it going, my fellow shiny Pokemon? Shiny Snorlax here, bringing you guys Pokemon Showdown. OU Beta battle, and replays still don't work, so yeah. I lead off with Vegeta, opponent leads off with this Skarmory. I go for a Dog Post, getting some good damage. Opponent goes for a Stealth Rock, and I go for another Dog Post, taking out the Skarmory. Opponent brings out Conkeldurr, and I switch out into Tien, predicting a Fire type attack, and I was ready. Opponent goes for a Drain Punch. And opponent focuses, but I go for a Scald, and opponent flinches. And opponent switches out into its Breloom. I go for a Scald just in case I want for another Focus Punch. And I set up one Toxic Spike predicting the Spore, and I switch out into my Nappa. And opponent goes for one Swords Dance, and opponent goes for another Spore, but it fails. And I go for a Hammer Arm, taking out the Breloom, but I get paralyzed from Effect Spore, I believe. And opponent brings out its Aegislash, and I switch out into my Yamcha, taking jack ton damage. Opponent goes for a King Shield, but fails. And I go for another King Shield, and opponent goes for another King Shield and lands it. I go for a Flare Blitz and get my attack lowered. I switch out into my Nappa, and opponent goes for a Shadow Sneak. And opponent goes for a Swords Dance, and I go for a Hammer Arm from this Misclick. I switch out into my Vegeta, and opponent goes for another Swords Dance. I go for a Fire Blast, taking out the Aegislash. And opponent brings out its Conkeldurr. I go for another Fire Blast, taking out the Conkeldurr. And opponent brings out its Blissey. Now here is where he becomes a complete peepee head. I switch out to my Shinron, and opponent goes for a Toxic. Alright. And now I know that he's going to stall, so I switch out to Hercule. Opponent goes for Protect, but fails. And I go for, and I Mega Evolve. Opponent protects, and I go for a Dragon Pulse just in case he switched into his Gyarados. I go for another Dragon Pulse, and opponent goes for Toxic, but fails. And I go for another Dragon Pulse, bringing it down to about half, and opponent goes for an Aromatherapy. Opponent goes for a Protect, and I go for an Aurora Sphere. And I go for another Dragon Pulse just in case if he switch. Opponent goes for another Soft Boiled, and opponent goes for another Protect, and I go for another Aura Sphere. Opponent goes for a Dragon, I go for a Dragon Pulse, and opponent goes for a Soft Boiled. I switch on to Yamcha just to kill it because it was barely helping. And I switch on to Shenron just to die. Opponent goes for Protect, and I go for a Hit Smash. And opponent goes for another Protect, and I go for another Hit Smash. And I go for another Hit Smash, getting some massive damage off, but however my Shenron goes down. Opponent goes for a Soft Boiled, healing up almost fully. And I bring out my Tentacruel, and he goes for another Protect. I am still asleep. And I am still asleep. Opponent goes for a Soft Boiled, and I am still asleep. Opponent goes for a Toxic but fails. And I wake up and go for a Toxic on the Blissey, which is really helpful. Opponent goes for another Toxic but fails. And opponent goes for Protect. And I go for Rapid Spin, but it fails. And I go for another Rapid Spin just to take out the Stealth Rocks. Opponent goes for a Soft Boiled, and heals up. I go for another Toxic Spike just to get some get some more hazards up. I switch out into my Nappa. Opponent goes for a Soft Boiled. Opponent goes for another Soft Boiled, and I go for a Stone Edge, predicting the Gyarados switch out. Opponent goes for another Soft Boiled, and I go for a Stone Edge, bring it down to about half, and the Toxic does a low damage. Opponent goes for a Soft Boiled, and I'm paralyzed, and I cannot move. And opponent is hurt from the Toxic. Opponent goes for another Soft Boiled, and I go for another Stone Edge. And the Blissey goes down from Toxic. And opponent brings out the Gyarados, gets the Intimidate off my Nappa. And opponent goes for an Earthquake, and I survive. I go for a Stone Edge, get very little damage out, but I leave Nappa out there to die. And I go for another Stone Edge, getting some chip damage. And opponent goes for another Earthquake, but I still survive it. I go for another Stone Edge, and almost take out the Gyarados. Opponent goes for an Aqua Tail, and almost takes out my Nappa, but I survive, and I go for a Stone Edge and take out the Gyarados. So yeah, that was a pretty decent battle. Sorry that I'm resorting to this, and I think it's going to be like this for a while, cause Showdown is being a real derp today. So yeah, like, comment, and subscribe to become Shiny Pokemon, and I'll see you next time.